without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Premier League Show, brought to you by American Scouser TV. We are here to review match week 13. I can't believe we are through 13 weeks of the Premier League season. And as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Paul Bickler. Bickler, how are you, my friend?
It's happening. I am glad that this Monday is almost over. It is also freezing cold out, which, like, to you New Englanders is probably laughable considering it's 46. But when the South sits at 75 for 3 months and then drops to 38 in the morning, it is cold.
Yeah, it is 28 degrees right now, and that is a balmy 28 because it was about 15 when I went outside to start my car this morning. That was awful. I will tell you that right now.
Yep.
Awful times two. And your Thanksgiving, outside of, I think, having some sick kiddos, how was the meal? How was the bird? How'd you do?
It was pretty good, man, considering the fact that I was flying solo, did it all myself. I think it turned out pretty well. Like, kids did a thing where they ate half of it, turned it all back into the kitchen, and then wanted snacks 15 minutes later. So it is 100%. What it is. Yep.
100%.
Yep.
Do we have any snacks? You're like, I told you we still had dessert, but you haven't finished dinner.
I'm like,
do we have snacks?
I'm like, what's great? Your dinner's still sitting here. So, like, yeah, you can imagine how well that goes over.
I can imagine how well it goes over. Well, it's funny, we're going to start tonight's topic talking about a holiday party, and it's probably a holiday party that this Premier League club wishes that half the world of football wasn't talking about. So I got to get your opinion and take on this. If you're not aware of the story, we can talk about it and kind of get up to speed. But the Leicester City players, they had themselves a holiday party, which I don't know which part I want more of your opinion on. One, the full out get up in costume that they went out in the Dutch hotel that they went out in, or the fact that the players thought it was acceptable to have a sign telling their former manager how much they missed him, a manager that they had just played in a really, really poor performance while still having an existing manager on the job at the time. So we'll get to Steve Cooper in a minute. I want to start with you first with, like, what does this say about what's happening inside the walls at Leicester Football Club if these players in 2024 believe you can get away with acting this way as a professional?
Well, I think it answers the question as to how he got fired and the timing of it. If you remember that conversation we had, right? Like, I think if players are out and doing this, they feel empowered by the organization to do so without ramifications, which is either, there's solidarity by the organization backing them, or there's a lack of institutional control, which could be either, right? I think it's cool. Like, there's a part of me that, like, is mostly shocked that a team that is in that bad of a spot in terms of their position on the table and how they've been playing, that there's enough solidarity for them to pull off that in general is sort of shocking to me, A. B, and I honestly think Steve Cooper needs to take some responsibility here, because if you are a manager and you are hired by an organization, it is part of your job as a manager to endear yourself to your players in some regard. And obviously that did not happen.
Yeah, I do think it was partially on that. I think it was also partially the fact that I think a big portion of why they didn't like Steve Cooper was because the supporters didn't like Steve Cooper. So it was like an easy out. And I think this is just players having too much power and it being that old, like, Players FC type mentality, where this is a club too, by the way, that, won the Premier League on a prayer And then their same supporters were basically saying 4 months into the next season, it was time for Ranieri to go after he delivered them a Premier League title out of nowhere. So, like, they are delusional. Let's be real. Like, 4 years ago, they were the toast of the town. Brendan Rodgers had them qualifying for Europe, winning the FA Cup, and then overnight they were in the championship. And personally, I don't know if Rude is the guy. I don't know if this will work. You know, we had this conversation with Kazi, I think it was during our watch along. He's very high on this team. I think it's a bang average side with a 38-year-old striker who's also the leader that allowed that sign to get held up. And like, I don't even care if you think that way. The fact that veteran players were seen in the pictures with that sign and laughing and like, it just shows to me that they're just lost. And I have no problem with losing a bad game and then going and having a Christmas party, because I think at times we judge these guys too much on what we see them do in real life, not quitting the fact that they're regular people and it's their job and they'll come back to work tomorrow and they deserve to have a Christmas party just like all of us, whether the business is going good or not at the time, right? It's a celebrate the holidays. But allowing yourself in 2024 to have pictures taken of you, have this come about, like, it just, to me, it's just absolutely speaks to zero leadership, zero veteran stability. And if I'm Rude, Van Nistelrooy, I'm thinking to myself, what the hell did I just get myself into? Because if they would do this to an English manager who's actually had some moderate success in this league, what the fuck are these fuckers going to do to me?
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, there's talk of like they're going to be active buyers in January. I don't know how that's the case considering their financial situation. So I don't know
Right.
how, I don't, you know, they're talking about like, you know, there's going to be a clean out and he's going to buy a bunch of United players, which I think is just pure conjecture on the connection. But also, I just don't know how a team, like, I don't know how financially they're going to enter into the market and be buyers. And I just don't see it. I think that this side in general, like when you look at this side, I don't know what Kazi sees. Like, I see a side that's like a below average championship side from a defending standpoint. Like, they're going to have problems in the championship if they're defending like that. So I'm just not sure.
So I do have to ask you quickly as we look here, which of the characters do you find the most entertaining and which one is most alarming to you? Just on quick review of the cast of characters that was dressed up for in the Leicester City holiday party.
I think this is just maybe a curiosity thing, but I want to know who's in this gray wig up front. Is this a Hamilton character? Is this Cruella DeVille? Like, because if it's Vardy, it's gonna be hilarious.
I'm thinking it's Cruella DeVille. I think you have it spot on because I think it's the black and white, and I think that's supposed to be a pen and most like a cigarette, you know, the cigarette holder. And most likely it is Jamie Vardy and it is a vape pen, or it's just him pulling off a hookah. And he's like, I'm 38.
What if nobody knew who it was and it ended up being like Steve Cooper?
Like, it'd be the best thing ever if someone was like, it was Steve Cooper. Actually, the best thing ever if someone was like, it's Enzo Maresca, and he's here partying with these guys, and he's the one who created the sign. I do think that shout is great about the person in the wig, but I also think the Teletubby. If you're a full-grown professional soccer player and you dress up as a Teletubby, you make it. Now, what I really want to know is like, I can't tell if Harry Winks is just dressed up as like a 1970s like porn escort, or if he's dressed up as some type of like Star Wars character, and that's supposed to be some type of like Imperial outfit with the white pants, because I think that the fact that Harry Winks is predominant through this whole story also is part of the reason that I like it so much. Because I still go back to thinking about the day that Harry Winks' professional career ended, which is when that big ass ran by him in the Champions League final, and he couldn't even follow suit. Like, he literally hasn't, I don't know that he's recovered from that moment. I think he's still looking over his shoulder, wondering if she's coming back by, and maybe this time she's not wearing a top.
Harry Winks, ladies and gentlemen.
Harry Winks, everybody. But something that doesn't need further ado, and maybe the only thing that is more entertaining than big box office weekends on holidays like this one was, is the review of the week that was VAR. And it was another very interesting week for all the people who support VAR, especially those who try to find reasons why, or reasons that it's still working. Because I got to be honest, the more I deal with this thing, the more I realize it's really not working, not one bit. So we'll start with the first match of the weekend, which was Friday afternoon. Rock bottom Southampton taking on top four challenger Brighton, who was trying to go top of the table. Southampton thought they had scored a dramatic late second goal to take the lead. It turns out it was chalked off for offsides. I don't know if I have a bigger problem with the call, the application of the call, or the fact that it took 5.5 minutes to get to the call. Did you see it, Paul? What is your stance on it? And when will they make any sense of the inconsistency?
I did see it. I hate this interpretation of the law in general, just because I feel like it lets goalkeepers massively off the hook in general. I mean, by application of the law, they probably got this right. I think the biggest problem I have with it is the fact that it took over 5 minutes, because that tells me that they were looking at all the wrong things and they didn't agree on it. Like, to me, if you're looking at this chronologically, you start with the the first player to the ball there that you think may be offsides. I think, or maybe interfering with play, right? I think the problem that I have with is this thing reeks of, we were looking at in having it sounds to me like there was a disagreement over whether he was interfering or not, and they decided, oh, let's go to the second player and see if he's offsides, because that will be an easier explanation. Then couldn't get that one, so then they went back to the original conversation. That order of operation leads you to a 5-minute situation. So
right.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I hated, because the second one doesn't even matter if the first one isn't adjudged to be a foul, or isn't adjudged to be or is adjudged to be causing the goalkeeper problems. And I think it just comes down to what was called on the field compared to what was easiest to explain. I do feel for Southampton, and I do feel for the smaller clubs. It does always feel like they're the ones that take the short end of the stick here. They are the ones that always seem to come up on the loose end of it, whether it's Wolves. Luton felt aggrieved by a lot of these calls last year. And I understand they're trying to kind of change the way that they're using these plays and using these calls. But this is the whole problem, too, with the semi-automated offsides. Because if you had the semi-automated offsides in place right now and working, of course, well, then you wouldn't have had to take 3.5 to 4 minutes for your bullshit reasoning of trying to go to the second call, because you would have quickly realized he was onside, and therefore you needed to deal with the first call. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you should get the call right on the field. And if you don't, you should quickly correct it with instant replay. Like, this whole clear and obvious, I think that's where the muddiness is of all these different plays. And I just don't know how any play like this will ever come into it. So we've seen this a lot of times, right? It is hard, because trying to do a dummy on a ball, or acting as if you're going to do a flick on a ball, could make the defender and or the keeper react in a certain way. In this instance, did Adam Armstrong have any bearing whatsoever on where Verbruggen is going to be and what the outcome of that play is going to be when the ball finds its way to Archer's foot.
Not for me, and really like what you're saying with this interpretation of this rule and the way it's called is that you're going to expect an attacking player to have the awareness that when he's in a goal scoring position, not to dummy in case like he affects play. Like that's absolutely ridiculous. Nobody's going to be thinking like that in that moment, or should they be?
So maybe a game that had probably the highest amount of VAR controversy, topics, reviews is the match that had, I think, the most amount of goals, both in the first half and in the total match, which was West Ham and Arsenal. Arsenal comes out rampant, scoring goals left and right, but they weren't without controversy and or discussion. So first one, I think, is a pretty quick one. Paqueta wanted the foul in the build-up on Timber, I think it was, on him in the box on the lead-up to the first goal. I think in that one, that was Gabriel's header. And God, if there's ever anything more guaranteed than Gabriel scoring on a header, it's ridiculous. Like, they'll talk about it, and then it happens, and you're like, oh, and there he is, and he scores. But Gabriel on that one, there's only been one goal this season in the Premier League chalked off due to a foul in the build-up. And shockingly enough, it was Southampton against Wolves, what would have been a game-winning goal. But I guess my question to you is, was it more about the fact that Paqueta's trying to really buy one there? Or is it that the Premier League has said, unless it is an egregious foul in the build-up, we don't want to be chalking off goals for random plays in build-up, because then we have to define how far back we go to check these things.
I think it's both, and I'll put a third layer in. I think it's probably even a higher threshold when there's a Brazilian involved, right? So, like, I think, like, to me, it just, like, when I first saw it, I thought for sure it was a pen, and then, like, when they showed the replay, I was like, oh, he just completely sold it. Like, he really did sell it. There's not a lot of contact there. I don't think even if you watch the player's reaction around him, like, nobody even really he didn't lobby too hard for it.
No, he actually didn't, and his teammates didn't either. But the fact that they looked at it as long as they did made me think, oh, they might chalk this goal off. But then I was like, that would be really, really soft, and that's kind of a weird way. Now, we want to talk about soft. We'll talk about the second big talking point, which was the penalty awarded. Awarded to Saka for the foul on Paqueta, goal taken by Odegaard. I've seen a ton on this one. Some call it a dive. Some call it a soft penalty. Others point to similar situations this year where when it's called on the field, it doesn't get overturned because there's minimal contact. Like, where do you land on this one? What was your gut when you saw it? Real time, what's your gut after thinking about it, reading?
I think it's soft, but I think we saw like a half a dozen of these this weekend. I felt like that were soft, and I do feel like they're pretty consistently calling it. And I also do feel like if that happens in the middle of the pitch, they're probably calling it still. You know what I mean? Like he went in, missed, and got contact. Like, I mean, it's not significant contact, but it's definitely there. He didn't get any of the ball, and he's in a spot where that happens and the foul is called. That's what you're going to get as a penalty. I didn't have that big of a problem. I do think it's soft, but I do think it's been being called that way across the board. And I think if you don't get ball and you do get man, even if it's, you know, not a lot of contact, you're opening yourself up there to that liability.
Yeah, I don't think it was a stone penalty by any means. I don't think that you could guarantee that it's a penalty any day of the week. I also think that in this league where they say things like that's too soft to be given as a penalty, or that's not enough contact to award a penalty. I think I've seen that. I've seen a lot more contact get reviewed by VAR and not be given, or not ask the guy to come look at the monitor. And I think this is where I have the issue with the inconsistency of it, is that I think there's contact like that all the time in the box. Way more on corners or even on attempts sometimes. And I don't think they ever end up asking to review it. So to like almost stand behind that it was enough to give the penalty, it's hard for me because I'm like talking out of both sides of my mouth. I want to be consistent with the application of the law, but then I want on-field referees to do the refereeing and not wait for the video to do it. So I probably should be commending them. He called the penalty. He called it a penalty and didn't wait for VAR to fix it, because in that instance, VAR wouldn't have fixed it, which is one of those chicken and the egg things, I think, is why I struggle with that one. Last one in that match was the Gabriel Uma face when Fabianski decided to come out and just plant at Gabriel. Anthony Taylor almost looked like he was apologizing to Bowen when he explained why it was a penalty. Do you think that was just Taylor realizing in the moment, like, I don't need VAR for this. I know what I just saw. That's a penalty. He just cleaned this dude's clock.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it was a pretty obvious, like, you didn't need to slow that replay down much to see that one coming out. Like, he wasn't even close.
And Fabianski didn't really fight it. All he really did was care about Gabriel's well-being, because he knew, I just cocked this guy in the face. And he did miss it. I mean, it wasn't like he got a knuckle on it. He missed it by 1.5 feet. I mean, I don't even know if he was – I don't think he was getting anywhere near it if Gabriel's big fat face wasn't right there. Like, I think he basically had – like, you would – if that was Timuchin punching Gabriel Jesus in the face, I would have been like, oh, he didn't even look for the ball. Like, I would have thought to myself, like, that was basically Fabianski was Timuchin going at Jesus in that moment. And that's kind of what I thought, actually, to be totally honest, as I saw it. Probably lets you know how disturbing of a human being I am. But we'll move on to the big match of the weekend, Liverpool versus Manchester City. The only real VAR big talking point of that match, of course, was whether or not they might chalk off the Diaz penalty. I still don't understand why anyone talks about this. It's a penalty all day for me. There is contact. Even without the contact, he's required to jump 2 feet in the air to not get his leg broken as a guy comes barreling out and has no chance of getting the ball. Like, it's a penalty all day for me. I think, all in all, I thought Chris Kavanagh actually had a decent day, which I never really say about Chris Kavanagh. I don't think he was good. I also think how weak Manchester City was made it easy, because only one team actually gave any effort. So there really wasn't a reason to worry about his officiating too much. Like, was there any moment in your mind you thought that there was a chance that VAR was going to overturn that penalty, even knowing it was Paul Tierney?
Well, there always is, especially when Manchester City's involved, right? But I thought it was a pretty cynical challenge, and I thought City, honestly, was pretty lucky not to get a straight red on it. I mean, they say that, Diaz knocked the ball out of the path, and that's why it wasn't a direct goal scoring opportunity. I mean, I think if Diaz gets up and over, he's scoring that. So, I don't know. I thought they were pretty lucky that way. I would have been shocked if they overturned, but, like, again, we've seen worse things happen in the City match before.
I think triple jeopardy would have come into play there, because he was at least trying to play the ball. Like, he came out to play the ball. He misses it completely. But if he just gets the player there, I think you're probably right. I think because you're giving the penalty and he was cautioned with a yellow, I think that's probably why the referee could use that. And he was going wide. I know what you're saying, but I think that's they got rid of that whole triple jeopardy thing a few years back, which probably is a mistake.
I think you can make the argument he came out for the ball and tried to play the ball. I think I saw it as more cynical than that, and maybe that's my red bias, but I think, to me, it seemed like a very professional tackle in the way that he came out at that angle. I think he knew he wasn't getting there.
Well, I don't think he thought he was going to get there. I think he hoped that maybe by rushing out the way he did, that Diaz would slow down or something. He would take a touch and take it away. I also think this is what happens when you play a backup keeper who's made 3 appearances in 3.5 months in a huge ass match like this, and you start tinkering and really, really kind of taking it under. So real quick, last one. There were a few other ones that we could have talked about. Some of the offsides calls, some of the goals that were scored, the penalty on Evanilson. I mean, there were felt like 100 penalties in that game. But I wanted to get your take on the Tom Carney red card, Fulham versus Spurs.
Knew you were gonna love that one. It's the identical challenge that you wanted Ndidi sent off on Palmer for. It's the same challenge. Yeah.
I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't understand how it was a red card this week and not last week. Now, I will say this. I thought it was a red card last week. I think it's a red card this week. And again, we this thing where the referees. Now, I will say this is what I do like. I think the ref thought he saw it right.
I think what sucks about it is that it's inconsistently applied, right? And VAR doesn't change any of that because it doesn't overturn either of them.
Correct. And I think my whole problem is that ultimately those referees should be getting both of those calls right.
Yeah.
As red cards. If you can't see blatant reds right in front of you, and I mean, these are happening on arguably the best player, and I know it's crazy to say that, but it's true. Kulusevski is Spurs' best player. Anyone who's watched them all season long knows, Son Heung-min might be the most talented. Solanke might be the highest buy. Kulusevski is the reason they're where they are, as inconsistent as they are in the table. To have him have that horror challenge, and it was a horror challenge. And I mean, Palmer's one of the 5 brightest stars in the entire league.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're not protecting those players, how can you have any faith for what you're doing for the rest of the players? So we'll get back to some of those other sides. Let's take a quick look here at the fixtures from the weekend. Obviously, there was the massive one yesterday. Top of the table, Liverpool took on second place Manchester City. Well, second place coming into the weekend wasn't second place by the time they played the match, and surely isn't second place now after losing 2-0. That was a big result. Obviously, Chelsea really just taking it to a very tired and depleted Aston Villa. Big result there. Brentford scoring 4, Arsenal scoring 5, Bournemouth with 4. So, Paul, I'll throw it out to you. Takeaway from the weekend, match you want to start. If we were going to highlight one of them and talk about for a couple minutes here, what jumped out at you? What really impressed you this week?
Well, I think last week what I said the match was going to be really interesting to me was Tottenham Fulham, which we touched on already, just because it's one London team underachieving, one overachieving, and they're right somewhere in the middle there, right? So, what's the truth? And honestly, it was a wash, right? It was kind of like Tottenham underachieved throughout the match. I thought Fulham kind of overachieved throughout the match. They made the most of their opportunities, looked good in key areas. So I didn't learn a whole lot there. I thought, does Brentford have something finally with Shada here? He's played well, but hasn't been scoring goals. He gets a hat trick this week, so that's interesting. I think, one of the things that I guess if we're doing the stock down thing, I think a player that we need to really sort of look at and talk about is Isak for Newcastle. He is too good of a player, and he means too much to Newcastle for them to handle the volatility of him being in and out of that lineup as much as he is injured. So I think we really need to talk about, is he durable enough for the Premier League? And what are the next steps for Newcastle? Is this somebody they should be building around or not?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's lots of talk all the time about all the money that, gets bandied about 70 million, 80 million transfers for him, and Arsenal being interested, and we've been linked at times. I'm with you there. And, as someone who invested in him coming into his fantasy team a couple times over the last few years and just brutally disappoints me all the time with his 40-minute substitutions after he gets a little knock on his hip and he can't keep going. That team was already going to have some struggles as Wilson became more fit. and got back to, determining who's going to be playing the majority of the minutes. I don't think that he's probably physically built for the Premier League in the long run. I think that's probably what's being proven in all of this. There's nothing wrong with that. He could probably be a very prolific striker back in Spain. He can probably go, play in Italy, obviously, if he wanted to, or Germany. There'll be places for him. I think he'll be frustrated because I think he saw himself moving to a bigger club. But I do think it's not just that, I don't think it's just talking about Isak, but even that performance. I mean, a 1-1 draw at Palace, and I know it took a 90-minute plus stoppage time goal for Palace to get the draw. But it wasn't like it was some vintage Newcastle performance. It was a really shoddy own goal scored on a, really just a good one piece of industry by Gordon down the right-hand side and just creating for himself and then smashing it off Mark Guy and the ball finding the back of the net. So, and, Palace, I mean, that was the match we did the watch along. And, it was, we should have been paid, to be honest. We should have. It was a slug. I mean, at one point, me and Tamuchin were literally talking about some random ass shit, and we were like, "Are we even watching footy at this point? And what the hell's wrong with Goal Rush?" We had Brentford 4-1. We had Brentford 4-1, Bournemouth 4-2, and what the hell was the third game? There was another game going on at the same time. And we were watching Crystal Palace Newcastle 0-0. And I was just like, this is the epitome of getting this shit wrong.
They don't pick the best match. They pick the match with the highest like US viewership for that club. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that they're always showing like Arsenal, City, Liverpool, big clubs. And if there's none of those, I guess probably picked up Newcastle, a lot of Newcastle supporters in certain areas of this country. I don't know.
Maybe it's it was just all five of those Crystal Palace supporters. We had one in the chat with us, and he was as depressed as we were, but he was from New Zealand, and I was like thinking to myself, like, you are watching Crystal Palace play from New Zealand and listening to me talk about it. I don't know who I feel worse for, because it was really, 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 really poor football match, but. I think one of the performances of the weekend, I think, I know people like to poke fun at Arsenal, and I understand, like, it's easy when you have Mikel Arteta and he's easy to dislike, but, like, it's still a good performance. Anytime you score 4 goals and a half in the Premier League, some of the football they played against West Ham was genuinely like breathtaking.
Yeah.
Some of the passing patterns that Odegaard, Saka, Timber's really, really good.
The right-sided stack of Timber, Odegaard, and Saka is going to cause some severe problems for anyone they play. If those three stay healthy together, it's going to be scary to see.
Well, it's almost like having Trent, Mo, and Jordan Henderson, except for he has Odegaard's ability to create a pass,
right,
and unlock a defense. Like, it's scary. And Odegaard works a lot harder than he gets credit to. Like, he runs. He's become a full out. I never thought he'd be a captain, an actual captain material. He's turned out to be a really, really good captain. I think they're a good side. I don't think they're great. I think they still have another level to go if they're going to win big, big things. But I don't think you can put in performances like they did against Sporting. We had a week where we beat the champions of Europe and 4-time champions of England, and we should be really, really proud of it. Arsenal did not do anything near to that, but they dismantled the team that dismantled the team we just beat in Sporting. And they went out and put on a clinic of how you take care of a team on the road the way we used to when we were that type of up-and-coming dominant force. Like, I'm really happy they had all the red card mistakes they had and some of the injury issues, and they dropped the points they did, because I wouldn't feel as good right now if we were 2-3 points away from Arsenal as I am with a 9-point lead on December 1st. It makes me feel a lot better about it.
Yeah, I think as important as Rodri is to City, we talk about that. I think that's how important Odegaard is to Arsenal.
We're seeing it.
Yeah, I think they just look like a completely different side when he's in there. He is the conductor. He is the guy who orchestrates how that team plays. And when he's not there, they look very different.
So let's take a look at the table after all the results are tallied. And here's the top half of the table. Liverpool sits as the informed team. Obviously, 4 wins and a draw on the spin. I mean, what else can you say? 13 matches, 11 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss, 26-8 goal differential. Second most goals in the entire division, tied for with a bunch of teams, least amount of goals conceded, best goal difference, best points, 9-point lead on both Arsenal and Chelsea. So, Paul, if I ask you right now, which of the 2 teams, Arsenal or Chelsea, would you be more worried about actually catching fire, going on a run, and putting some pressure on Liverpool come April or May when it comes to the Premier League title?
I'm more concerned with Arsenal. I think they've got more parts that can beat you, and I think they're better defensively than Chelsea.
Yeah, I think you're right on Chelsea's defensive prowess. I think that's the issue with them. I do think, Enzo Maresca, I know we talked about him earlier, he deserves an enormous amount of credit for how quickly they have adapted to his project. We're all enamored with what Arne Slot has been able to do with Jurgen Klopp's troops. The fact that Maresca literally took troops from about 5 different generals and found a way to pick the parts that would work, jettisons the ones that wouldn't, played Enzo at the beginning, it didn't work, then figured out how to rejig him in, and Enzo Fernandez is starting to look like a $100 million player. He's starting to look like the player that had the great World Cup that got him the move to Chelsea. I still don't know if it's going to work with what they do, and I thought it was laughable that they were playing Caicedo as right back in the last match, but then he went out and put in like a 45-minute like virtuoso performance of playing right back because the guy's so superior talented. Lavia looks good, like never in a million years would I think that Nick Jackson would be closing and finishing the way that he is, and Palmer is just balls. I mean, he is cold. It's unreal how good the guy is.
Yeah, he's unreal to watch for sure.
So let's stay out of City. We're going to spend enough time talking about City tonight on our other show that we're going to do. But Forest with a win, gets back in the good column, keeps themselves in 6th place. Tottenham still within touching distance of that top 4. Brentford, United, and Fulham rounding out the top 10. Between Forest, Tottenham, Brentford, United, Fulham, which one of those 5 teams has the greatest chance of fighting themselves into that top 5?
Oh God, dude, this is tough. This is really tough. All right, I'll still say, my head tells me that Tottenham is still in this mix just because of the amount of quality they have in that side. They're just so damn inconsistent. But the talent's there. I think Forest could hang around. I've got to. I know that we're like 13 weeks in, right? So like most of these teams are just kind of who they are at this point. I just worry about Forest, and I never thought I'd say this about Forest. Is my worry with them is can they find enough goals? Because they're so good defensively, which also I didn't think I'd ever say. But like I just don't know if they can find enough goals there. I'm gonna need some time on the Amorim thing with United. I know that everybody is like, losing their shit. They lost 4-0. Rashford scored twice. By the way, Rashford 50 goals for United. Like they're making a big deal of that. He's been there since I was like 9 years old. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know why that's such an accomplishment. He's been there for decades, it feels like. Anyway, I need to see more versus quality competition. You going in and stomping Everton out 4-0. I just need to see more here. It could be something, yes, but we've seen this before with United. So I'm just kind of waiting to see on that.
Yeah, I still think there's just too many spaces in between, too many teams in between. Even though they're 4 points off or 5 points off, whatever it is, of top four, I still think there's probably too many teams they have to jump over, and I do think they are going to hit some inconsistency. I do think you can see, though, clearly within just a couple matches, and I watched a little bit of the extended highlights because I wanted to see if I saw anything different. You can see there's actually a style of play, and I think you hadn't seen that in a long time at United, especially that entire last like year of the Ten Hag period. I think the guy's a good football coach, and I think that very similar to what. Listen, I think he was one of the guys that Liverpool would have liked to have hired. And I think Arne Slot was another guy and I think Xavi Alonso might have been another guy because I think they're all the same thing. And that they're all very tactically astute and they coach up players and make them better. And I think that's what he's going to do. The question is, will he be able to get rid of the players he doesn't want to have? And I think that's the difference.
And I think the hard part I'm at right now is when I watch it, I see some things tactically different, but I don't think they're things that are making United better. Like when I look at what like makes United look better right now, it's fucking effort. Like, you know what I mean? It's not anything tactically. Like these players are just put in a shift for the first time in a fucking year. You know what I mean?
Well, that's and we know that shit happens with new managers.
Right.
But he is playing Diallo. He is deploying, he started Xerxes in this match.
I do love that he's starting the young kids. Ahmad, Xerxes, those are things you can build around. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. He's actually playing Bruno in an advanced role instead of a deeper role. No, I still don't understand the Ugarte thing because you had the guy at Sporting. I said this in Discord. I was like, maybe Amorim knew the guy was shit because and PSG figured it out quick. Like, he's not a top quality player. Because he's literally playing the corpse that is Casemiro. And the game before that, he played Christian Eriksen. So, you're playing two dead men rather than a $60 million signing from the summer who you used to coach at Sporting. So it should be the first player who knows your tactics and your system. And he still can't get on the pitch, which, makes me smile. Probably doesn't make the people at the United stand as happy. Let's take a look at the bottom half of the table. The portion of the table United has taken up most of the season before. Well, they were given a fixture against Everton. But then again, if you get to play championship sides, you usually have a good chance of going up in the table. Newcastle, 11th. Only thing more surprising is Aston Villa in 12th.
Yep, super surprising considering my pre-season prediction that was made on no sleep. But yeah, surprising for sure. Definitely not built for multiple competitions here. The biggest thing, we talked about this last week. I think that Emery is going to have to reevaluate this team until it can put its midfield back together. And I think he's going to have to stop playing such a high line with this team right now. They've got to start getting some shape back. They've got to go back to square one and start hitting people on the counter. But yeah, he's got some retooling to do for sure. Just kind of shocked it's taken him this long to start putting that back together.
Where are you on West Ham at this point? And I don't mean that in a do we fire Lopetegui? Are they talented? Are they, you know what I mean? Are they figuring it out? I guess my question is they had the big win against Newcastle that pulled them away from the drop zone a little bit. They're within 6 points of it. Is this going to be a situation where West Ham literally is relatively safe all season long on the plain fact that there are 6 teams that are just much worse than them in the division?
I think it comes down to the fact that West Ham is one of the 2 teams that, as a degenerate gambler, I would never put money on in this league, and that's Tottenham and West Ham, because you just do not know what version of that team you're going to get. You have no, how would you ever know what side you're getting coming into a match? because I've seen West Ham go out and light the world on fire, and I've seen them come down and look like they were playing with one leg. Like you just don't know which team you're going to get. There's no consistency there. I this team, I don't know how many years it's going to pretend like, Antonio is their answer up front. It seems like every year they go buy somebody, every year they sit him, and then every year, about 3 months in, they bring him back out starting, and he's the only one that can consistently kind of find goals outside of Bowen. Like they just got some bigger issues they're going to have to address, but it's the consistency thing for me. I don't know that they've put back-to-back performances in all year, either good or bad. I just feel like they're all over the place.
Yeah, they're really, really poor. I just think they're going to be one of those sides that I think every once in a while they'll creep up and they'll pick up 3 points on Jared Bowen scoring a worldie, or, a free kick here or there, or, a big performance by Fabianski and net or something like that. Like I just think they're going to secure enough points. And because I think that the bottom half of this table is so poor, and I think victories are going to be, as we can see, nobody from 15 down has more than 2 wins.
Yeah, and
I mean, that's
so let's see, you got 25 fixtures there, 5-5, and 4 wins out of 25 across 5 teams. Yeah, it's wild.
It's unbelievable. So I think that when it all gets said and done, I think the head-to-head matchups are going to be key. I do think that, though I think Southampton has actually shown more fight than their bottom of the table record actually shows. Like, I think they go at it like Ipswich. I think they have a little less talent and they have a lot less steel. And I think that's the difference. I think Ipswich has the steel to pull a draw or 2 more across the line, which is why they have 4 more points than them, right? But they're all draws. As much as I love the little plucky Ipswich town, the more I watch them, the more I think maybe I'm wrong and they're not going to be able to find a way to stay up. I think when it's all said and done, if Palace can figure it out, I think Wolves has enough in them to find their way out of it. And I think they're going to stick with the manager. And I think it's really going to come down to Leicester and Everton being one team that goes down. And, I got to be honest, off the story we had earlier tonight and talking about how Steve Cooper went, I won't be shocked if it's Leicester. But I'm not going to root for it, because I will say I like the Premier League when Leicester City's in it. Like, I actually like Leicester City. I think the King Power Stadium is fun. It's loud. It seems like it's a good Midland team, right? It adds another club that's won, right? And someone has a little bit of recent history. I just think when you have a club like that where the players are running, when you have a team that is in the bottom 5 to 6 in the Premier League and the players are calling the shots, your club's probably in trouble. And I think all of us, to a man, when Burnley would be down in the bottom and Sean Dyche were there, we were like, yep, they got the right guy for the job. He's a guy who might be able to get him out of this. But you also knew that whether those players like Sean Dyche or not, ain't nobody going on holiday and holding up a sign that they want Eddie Howe in as manager, right? At Burnley. Ever. Because they know that they'd wake up with like Sean Dyche's wife's head in bed with them. But she wouldn't be dead. It'd actually be his wife. And I have to imagine that's not something that anyone would want to run into on a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday morning or a Thursday afternoon. Just kidding, Mrs. Dyche. We're just kidding. We like to call your husband the douche. Just so we're clear. Let's look at the fixtures this week really quick, and then we will get out of here. Matches, they come thick and fast. They start tomorrow afternoon. Ipswich Town, Crystal Palace, and Leicester versus West Ham. That's a big 6-pointer down there. That's a couple big 6-pointers down at the bottom of the table. And then Wednesday, you have a full slate. City, Forest, Southampton, Chelsea, Newcastle host Liverpool, Arsenal, United, and of course Everton, Wolves, Villa, and Brentford. And then Thursday we wrap it up with Brighton and Fulham and Bournemouth and the enigma that is the traveling Tottenham Hotspur. What match here are you most intrigued with, Paul? Do you see a big upset for us? If I had to ask you for your lock of the week, which match would it be?
Ooh, lock of the week. That's good. I mean, I'm going to refrain from picking Liverpool here, even though I want to as a homer. I think my lock of the week is going to be Chelsea Southampton.
Yeah.
I just think the firepower is too much, and that's probably the weakest side there. There is a part of me that wants to go Arsenal because I think Arsenal is going to humble Manchester United and kind of bring them back down to earth. But yeah, I'll go Chelsea.
Yeah, I'd say Chelsea's probably the lock of the week. I think I also think at some point, right, some Premier League side is going to be on the other side of the score of Manchester City. And as good as Forest defense has been, there is a moment where you play your game, but also see a weakened opponent that you think you can exploit the way maybe Liverpool exploited or the way other teams have exploited, right? And you maybe don't have the assets to do it. And I could see maybe Forest being a little exposed Saturday afternoon and like Holland scoring one early or them starting De Bruyne finally and like it clicking early and having one of those days where City wins like 5-1, 5-0. So I think City could be a pretty good lock for this week, but I agree with you. I think Chelsea, I think if there's an upset game for this weekend, I wish I could say Brentford over Villa just because of the way Villa's playing right now, but Brentford is just so poor away from home. But I really think you got to look here, and I don't disagree with you. I think Arsenal could humble United. I think sometimes, though, these big matches in these big moments, I think they lead to weird results. And I think that Arsenal Manchester United is still a big match no matter what, like it always is. And I could see United showing up, putting in some form of a performance, and maybe keeping it close to the point where they might be able to nick something late. Maybe it's me just being a homer and just rooting for them to drop points more and more. But as always, if you are watching us on YouTube, please go ahead, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, get in, let us know how we can do the show better. We will be back with another Premier League show next week. And of course, check out all the content each and every week. Thank you and have a great night.